After being in the credit card game for a few years now, I've flown on all major US airlines, as well as a few big names internationally. British Airways, Icelandair, Lufthansa, you get the picture. Now, it's no secret that airline status is kinda hard to earn these days. Hotel loyalty status is a lot easier. Most of the time, you just have to have a card. But with airline status, that is really less and less the case these days. And because of that, guys, having lived in Seattle, Washington, where I grew up, going to school in Washington, D.C., and then finally permanently moving to Washington, D.C., I've developed loyalty to and broken up with several airlines over the last few years. Today, I'm going to walk you through my journey of preferred airlines and how my airline preferences changed over time and how that affects the credit cards that I have or have had in the past. Now, to do this, guys, we do need to go back to my roots, the great city of Seattle, Washington. There are two airlines that fly a lot to Seattle, and those are Alaska Airlines and Delta. Now, Alaska was my preferred option for a while because they had daily flights between Seattle and Washington, D.C., which is where I went to school and, of course, live now. Somehow I earned MVP elite status with Alaska between 2019 and about 2021, and I must have earned it just because of all of those cross-country flights that I would take over the course of a year while I was in school. I didn't go home very much, but whenever school would be out for a break, I would go back to Seattle, and those cross-country flight segments add up pretty quickly. That's just a hunch, though, because I'm not very well versed when it comes to earning status with Alaska, or frankly, most airlines, because I just don't chase it anymore, but that had to have something to do with it. Because I flew Alaska so often, I decided to open up the Alaska Airlines Signature Visa. I did get rid of it last year due to some of the new changes put in place, including an annual fee hike, and I just wasn't getting enough value from the card to begin with because I had stopped flying those Seattle to DC segments consistently. I still try to visit my hometown whenever possible, but frankly, the reality of it is it's going to be a once or twice a year type thing. I also never used the companion fare, which is unfortunate to say the least. Previously, before the changes, you would automatically be given a companion fare every single year after you pay the annual fee, of course, and it would be about $120 to take somebody else with you to anywhere that Alaska flies. I did cover the Alaska Airlines card in one of my earlier videos, so I won't go too much into it here, but I also received free checked bag every time I would travel on Alaska Airlines, making things pretty easy to move back and forth between Seattle and DC while I was in school. And I also got a 40,000 mile sign-up bonus, most of which was used to redeem a British Airways flight from London to Seattle. And while I could have been grandfathered into the no-spend companion fare, I wasn't getting enough value to justify the $95 annual fee anyway. And now if I were to apply for the card again, it would cost me $6,000 annual spend on the card every single year just to have access to this companion fare. So I guess it wasn't the smartest move to product change away from it. Had I been living in Seattle or a different Alaska Airlines hub, then I most certainly would have kept the card. It's just harder to use when you are flying to an Alaska hub, therefore having a lot less flight options. Now, of course, my other option would be Delta. This would be my second favorite for my Seattle to DC flights. I've never had Delta status in my life, and I probably never will, but I do think that Delta has the best domestic economy product out of all the US airlines. So if I was able to get a good fare on Delta, I'd probably take it maybe even over Alaska. But the downside is because Delta's product is so good, it's of course going to be a little bit more expensive. And because Delta was really my 1B option to get to Seattle while I was studying in DC, I decided to apply for the American Express Delta Gold credit card back in fall of 2021. And I was denied. This was the first and only credit card I've ever been denied for. It stung a little bit, guys. I did not expect that. It was about 6 months after I had gotten the Alaska Airlines visa. So looking back, I guess it makes sense. I didn't have a huge credit history at the time, just about 2.5 years. So while it was really annoying at the time, I guess I could see it. Even still, I've seen people get approved for Amex cards with less credit history and a higher velocity. The Delta Gold currently has a sign-up bonus of 40,000 miles after you spend $2,000 in the first 6 months from account opening. So it's a very attainable sign-up bonus, and that is another reason why I was attracted to it. Because as a college student, kind of a struggle to spend $4,000 in 3 months at the time for some of the other more standard offers like the Chase Sapphire Preferred, for example. Another cool thing is the $99 annual fee is typically waived in year one. The multipliers are unremarkable. I wouldn't really put a lot of spend on this card anyway, but you do get 2 times miles on dining, groceries, and Delta purchases, and then 1 times miles on everything else. Like most other mid-tier airline credit cards, you will get a free checked bag. And something that I didn't really realize was you do also get baggage insurance, up to $1,250 for a carry-on and $500 for a checked bag. And there's also secondary collision and damage waiver insurance as well. Now, post-graduation is where things took a different turn. I no longer had that need to constantly be going back and forth between Seattle and Washington, D.C., so it was time to pick a new airline. And I'm basing this primarily on practicality. If it were based on quality alone, I would fly Delta all the time. I really like their economy product, like I said earlier. But to save money and points, I had to look at things in a bit of a bigger picture. United, for example, has a hub at Washington Dulles, which is my primary airport. So it makes sense to start flying United a lot, right? And that's kind of what I've started to do. I've taken United to and from Chicago last year. I took it home from Seattle over the holidays, and I'll be using it for my international trip coming up. I'll probably also try to use United for work, just so I can start earning some more miles and building that up without having to transfer too many points from Chase or Bilt. And I don't have status with United, and I don't really expect to travel on United enough to be able to chase that status to begin with. And with United comes a lot of Star Alliance partners, which will make it a lot easier to travel internationally, especially out of Washington Dulles, because we have a lot of international airlines that fly to a lot of different destinations, and a few more that you might not even really think of. For example, Washington IAD has direct flights to Accra, Ghana, Lagos, Nigeria, and a few others in West Africa. Like, that's pretty unique, I would say, outside of, say, New York City, which I'm sure has flights everywhere. Another reason that I'm drawn to United is because they have a Keeper airline credit card. It's the only airline credit card that I would consider keeping long term for my personal situation, and that is the United Explorer card. Whenever I finish out my roadmap, I do want to take a long look at the United Explorer card from Chase. The only issue is, of course, that wonderful 524 rule. Gonna be at 624 for a while, so I'm going to have to wait and see. This is probably a 2025 card. Right now, there's the standard welcome offer of 60,000 miles after you spend $3,000 in the first 3 months from account opening. The card's annual fee of $95 is also waived in the first year. That alone is really appealing for me. The card also has some pretty similar multipliers to the Delta Gold: 2 times dining, 2 times hotel stays, and then 2 times United, and 1 times on all of your other purchases. So again, not a card that I would put much spend on, but still better than nothing. In addition to a free checked bag, you do also get a credit to use for TSA PreCheck, Global Entry, or Nexus. This would be particularly useful as my player 2 and I nail down TSA PreCheck. It'd be nice to be able to use for Global Entry for international destinations. And yes, Global Entry does include TSA PreCheck, but the processing time can take a long time. So if you're not traveling internationally frequently, it might be better to just go with TSA PreCheck. I have 2 international trips coming up in the next few months, so I probably just gonna have to go with TSA PreCheck from some of our other cards. And then later on, we can always add Global Entry into the mix from this credit card. The biggest thing for me is the 2 United Club Lounge passes every single year. My primary airport, Washington Dulles, has a ton of different lounge options. I have access to Capital One lounges, Priority Pass, Plaza Premium, and I guess there is also a United lounge there, but I don't really need to use it at that airport. But where these passes would come in handy would be at National Airport, DCA, which is my secondary airport. There are no Priority Pass options there. They are building a Centurion lounge, but I don't have the Amex Platinum, so that is pretty much ruled out. But with these 2 passes, on the off chance that we're taking a flight out of DCA, we can use those and still have a form of lounge access available. Finally, the card also has primary CDW, which is pretty nice, as well as trip cancellation / interruption and delay reimbursements available. All right, before I wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about my airline experiences in Europe. Well, I'd be remiss if I did not mention Ryanair. If you think Spirit's bad, just wait. Take a flight on Ryanair within Europe. You'll see. You take Ryanair if you want to pay cash and stretch your dollar to the maximum possible value. I did this in 2022 for about 5 to 6 months, and it allowed me to visit 27 European countries before I got fully into the credit card game. Although, with that said, I do wish that I had known at least a little bit about points before paying cash for all of those flights. And I also used British Airways a decent amount. The big flight, of course, was that redemption that I mentioned earlier, using Alaska miles via the One World Alliance to take British Airways home from London to Seattle and finally move back to the US after 6 months abroad. Well, there you have it, everyone. What do you think about the Delta Gold, the Alaska Airlines credit card, or the United Explorer? I'd love to know, so please leave a comment below. Also, what are your thoughts more generally about airlines, chasing status, and any other thoughts on airline credit cards that I did not include in the video today? I appreciate each and every one of you as we continue to build out a community together on this channel. I've been Josh. Take care, and I'll see you next time.